started ballet at the age of 3. I was a horrible ballerina, but I fell in love with dancing. Throughout my adolescence, I went from ballet to tap. Tap took me to jazz, jazz took me to hip hop, and then I ended up in swing dancing. I loved it all. Throughout my early 20s, my friends and I practically lived at Disney's Dance Palace, Mannequin's Dance Palace, that is. It was the top club back in the days of downtown Disney because it had a rotating dance floor. It was like dancing on a giant record that spun round and round. It was great. My friends and I were there almost every Friday night, but this particular Friday was special because it was Tina's birthday. Tina is my best friend and the only person I know who can do 6 shots, 3 beers, and still get on and off that dance floor. But this Friday night was really special. I was on my drive to meet her for her birthday dinner when my favorite James Brown song came on the radio. Woo! I feel good. I knew that I would now. But just then, a car from oncoming traffic hopped a median and hit my car head on. The jaws of life were used to pull me from the wreckage. I had several injuries, but my right leg was in the shape of the letter S. The first hospital I was taken to called in an orthopedic traumatologist. I wasn't sure what that was, but the man stood at the edge of my hospital bed and told me my leg might not be savable. I was 23, a dancer, and this man said my leg might not be savable. He kept talking rapidly, said I needed to be air-vac'd by helicopter to another city. I was scared, but at that age tough and fiercely independent. So when I found myself in the hospital facing the possibility of never dancing again, I didn't even think to ask my family for help, at least not right away. A week later, I was still in the ICU. My bones were mostly put back together with metal plates and screws, but a splint on my leg was put on too tight. The restricted blood flow caused gangrene. I actually thought gangrene was one of those things that only happened in the olden days. Like, didn't antibiotics fix that? I only knew about it from old war movies and reruns of MASH, but there it was, a part of me. And this particular type of gangrene has a very high mortality rate and causes excruciating pain. And to make that so much worse, I have a genetic disorder which renders a lot of medications ineffective. Opioids, topical numbing agents, antidepressants, basically everything you give a patient when they're in pain doesn't work on me. The pain was so bad, I started hallucinating. And that's when I called my dad because he's a pharmacist. He answered the phone and immediately told me to calm down, which was expected because I was pretty hysterical. He always did treat me a bit more like a patient than a daughter. He asked me to list the medications I'd taken, and when I did, he said that I was just a difficult patient. If I don't respond to opioids, there isn't much anyone can do for me. So I begged him to offer me something, anything, but he didn't know how to respond to that. Hearing the desperation in my voice made him shut down. Like his father, he learned to bury emotion. So while I was alone in the hospital, he was golfing just 2 hours away. While my dad hid from emotion, my mom actually surrounded herself in them. She was the parent that taught me to befriend stray dogs, befriend strangers, and celebrate birthdays. She was a dancer herself, so she understood how traumatic this experience was for me. When I called and asked her to come to the hospital, she told me she couldn't afford the plane ticket. When I told her, hey, I've got, $1 million in medical bills right now, I'll buy your ticket, she said she couldn't leave her husband at home alone. You see, it wouldn't matter what I said to my mom because she suffers from mental illness. She can be very loving, artistic, and beautiful, but her illness makes her self-centered and abusive. I understood all of that from a very young age, but I still wasn't prepared for a phone call that we had 4 months later. I'd just gotten out of a skin grafting surgery when the phone rang. She found out my brother, who lived with her but was an adult, was going to come visit me. Somehow in her sick and twisted mind, she decided that meant that he was choosing me over her. And her response was to try and hurt me. She said this was an example of why she never wanted a girl. Girls were nothing but manipulative bitches. Now, I know that sounds harsh, but she didn't mean it. She never meant it. It was a product of her own shame and insecurities. But I needed the loving side of my mom then. I needed her to tell me that I was going to get through this. I needed her to tell me that I was going to dance again. But instead, she got even more out of control. And she said, "I hope you die, Danielle, from the STDs you'll probably get from being such a slut." I had been bedridden for 5 months at that point. The possibility of dying was still very much a possibility. So I did the only thing I could. I told her I loved her, and then I blocked her number. When people talk about physical traumas like the one I experienced, they don't usually talk about the harsh lessons that come with it. Like the realization that when your world stops, everybody else's keeps moving. The hardest part about almost dying isn't the physical part. It's having to realize that not everyone will love you the way you want to be loved. From the age of 23, when my trauma started, to the age of 32, I had over 20 surgeries, and my parents didn't come to the hospital for any of them. But my friends did, my boss did, strangers visiting other patients did, and when the nurses started taking their lunch breaks in my room, and the surgeon started calling me his daughter, well, I knew I had what I needed to get through this. I chose to focus on the love in front of me instead of the love that I wasn't receiving. And with that understanding of love, I was able to build stronger relationships with my parents. And when I had my ankle replaced a few years later, my dad was at the hospital. I'm no longer able to dance like I used to at Pleasure Island, at Mannequin's Dance Palace on that rotating dance floor. But I know now that I'm never gonna stop dancing, and I'm always gonna have someone to dance with. Thank you.